Welcome to the Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and with me today is Mike Vizard. How are you?
I'm doing great. Always happy to be here with you because, digital transformation, it never ends.
This is true. And with that, we're going to go into our first information here, which is that Atlassian has tapped into AI to automate software engineering workflows. And on top of that, we also see AWS adding generative AI tools as well to automate tasks. So what are your thoughts about this?
So here's an interesting thing that seems to be going on. I mean, AWS kind of previewed this last year, but didn't really explain how it works. And Atlassian is down the same path, and I suspect so is Microsoft and a few other folks. And they're taking the knowledge graphs that they each have created, and those knowledge graphs kind of enable you to establish the relationships between various data sources that might exist in your organization. And then you can take that and feed that into a database that understands some sort of vector capability, which will then automatically expose that to a large language model to enable you to launch queries against that in natural language, and you'll get an output of a recommendation or a summary or whatever it is that you're looking for. The interesting thing about all this is it can now all be done without having to have a bunch of data engineers sitting in the middle of that process. So now I can just tell the prompt that I want to use this data and all related data to be exposed to the LLM to create some sort of request, and it will automatically come back. And so that's kind of an interesting first piece of it. The second piece of it is that the LLMs themselves are increasing the number of parameters they have, and as that increases, so does the reasoning capability. So the LLMs are able to now understand a series of related tasks and execute them. So if you go to them and say, build me a website, it can. And so this is kind of going to radically accelerate what we think about digital transformation here, because a lot of folks were under the impression that in order to expose the relevant data to the LLM, I would have to go master all of these so-called RAG techniques and search engine techniques myself. And apparently that's not going to be the case. And that will enable subject matter experts to automate all kinds of things without necessarily having to even get a lot of developers involved. So we're kind of on the cusp of a new era of digital transformation here. I think it will be unleashed in ways that a lot of folks aren't planning on, and frankly, might need some governance, but it's going to be interesting times.
Yeah, definitely. It's opening doors to a lot more people able to use these different software programs without having to have as many skills. And I think it's also going to, where it may eliminate some of those jobs, they'll just be overseeing to make sure it comes out accurately and managing it. So I think we'll see a shift in jobs, but not necessarily will they be without jobs.
Yeah, and there'll still be a small tendency for the LLM to hallucinate, but it will get smaller over time. I think the biggest problem with the LLMs is when they're fibbing, they fib convincingly, so people believe it, and it's hard to pick up on those little anomalies. But the LLMs themselves are going to be trained on a narrow range of data, and they'll be smaller. And as a result, it won't need petabytes to kind of implement this stuff. I can run them in terabytes at the edge or wherever they're needed, and it will just significantly transform the way we think about managing these business processes. So I think every digital CxO out there needs to really wrap their heads around how all this stuff works. I mean, to your point, they will need to be supervised. There will be governance requirements, but the days when we had so many people doing so many manual tasks that it took, 3 months for a project to get launched, never mind completed, I think that's coming to an end.
Most definitely. Next, we talk about cost control. This is, of course, a big concern of business leaders, how much it's going to cost. So we have a great article up on Digital CxO if you want to read more. but it's about managing costs when you're executing customer-centric digital transformations. And, customers are expecting more. Their expectations are much higher now. And so business leaders need to consider hard and soft costs, it says. And when they're designing the customer-centric programs, they need to improve the cultural readiness within companies, because that appears to be low at the moment.
Yeah, I think the first phase of digital transformation was all about the customer experience, and let's make sure that that is awesome, because customers will simply buy more if they're happier, right? It's not rocket science in that regard. But in the last 6 to 9 months, there's been a lot more pressure on digital CxOs to implement cost controls. I mean, theoretically, I can provide the greatest digital experience at any cost. I think the art of the thing is, can I do it in a way that doesn't break the bank? And that is more challenging than it looks, because there are so many things going on in the back end services that drive the digital experience on the front end that no one really has a good handle on what the cost of delivery for those things are. We see organizations trying to figure out how to understand what their cloud consumption rates are, because nobody knows how many workloads are running and what's driving what. And then a bill shows up at the end of the month, and the CFO gets that and yells at the CIO, and the CIO goes running to the chief digital officer and goes, "What are you guys doing? This is crazy." I think ultimately the digital CxO needs to take a little more ownership of this process here, because, if you're the one enjoying the meal, you should pick up the check.
Yeah, and plus there are just so many tools and so many platforms available, and so many different vendors vying for attention. So it might be a little overwhelming to understand exactly what's needed, and to kind of narrow it down to just what's needed and get that return on investment.
Yeah, and your point is well taken. Who knows how many actual back-end services and APIs are being invoked to deliver any given digital service? All those things have a cost, and they're not free. So somebody needs to understand what that is, and make some sort of ROI argument that the business can understand, because otherwise we're going to have a backlash from the business side who's going to say, the cost of delivering these great digital experiences is far higher than it's worth. So this is a problem.
Yes. So next, we are going to talk about digital transformation coming to healthcare. And, we've seen this in fintech already. And now we have what's called healthtech, as health facilities try to digitally transform their processes and offer virtual care and assistance. We're seeing that more and more. So what are you hearing out from business leaders when it comes to navigating the digital transformation in the healthcare world?
All right. Well, this is one of these, from your lips to my doctor's ears. I sure hope that happens. We've talked about this subject in the past, and digital healthcare progress is limited, to be kind. A lot of it is just kind of, we've, slapped a mobile front end on a back end process that is governed by electronic medical records that are rigid and difficult to use, and therefore don't lend themselves to a lot of agility. There's clearly a lot of re-entering of data, and in my experience, every time medical data is re-entered, the probability that it's wrong is high, and that leads to all kinds of unfortunate consequences, from people wasting hours in a doctor's office to somebody potentially dying because the wrong thing was prescribed. This is, honestly, it's a mess, and it's not necessarily the fault of our medical staff. It's just that the back-end systems that were put in place to support them just don't do the job. I mean, I think we kind of need to take a giant step back and say, okay, well, if healthcare is a priority, and we want to reduce the cost of healthcare, and we also want everybody to have a better experience, all this stuff starts with a conversation around IT and workflows and things that digital process managers should be all over. And yet, we're talking about, quote unquote, health tech like it's a new thing. We've been talking about healthcare and IT for 4 or 5 decades. I think the first conference I ever went to in this sector is still running out there, and everybody shows up, but I don't know. I just don't feel like enough progress is being made.
Yeah, this is true for it to have been spoken about for this long. And it seems to me like there would be more advancement then, because I, for one, I still go to the same doctor's offices every year and have to continuously fill out this tablet. So it's like, okay, wow, it's digital because it's on a tablet, but I'm filling out all the same stuff over and over again on the tablet. It's not much less time than filling out paperwork. So it's like, where's that digital transformation for me, the customer, the patient?
Yeah, I wish that, somebody sitting in the Oval Office would make this like a priority, because it's the kind of thing where it touches everybody, everybody experiences, and everybody goes home with the same kind of, muttering, to be kind. And it just could be a better way of thinking about this, but maybe we need to make it a national priority, because it's not happening of its own accord.
Yep. So next, there's another really interesting article on digital CxO, and it pinpoints one big factor that business leaders are not looking at and are neglecting, which is the content management system. And it argues that having an excellent content management system in place is the weapon for business growth. So what do you have to say?
I totally agree with this article, and I urge everybody to read it, because so much of what we try to do around digital transformation is, we're trying to mess around with systems of record and systems of collaboration. But at the end of the day, most of what this is about has to do with digital media. Now, I'm going to say content management system broadly. That includes, all the stuff you use to manage your websites. It includes all those digital assets. It includes all the video, all the audio, all the social media stuff. And you can wrap that up into a single system to manage that experience on behalf of the end customer. And yet, it's probably the thing we pay the least amount of attention to. But I would argue, almost everything that we do at TechStrong revolves around that content management system we have. And these days, people are creating quote unquote headless ones. So I can build an app that sits on top of the CMS and does all kinds of amazing things. And the cool thing about it is all the assets, all the data, and all the stuff that I already need is an API call away. So I'm kind of like, part of my soul is just, maybe I'm too close to it. And, I live inside a content management system, but I'm kind of baffled as to why the rest of the world is still having this conversation.
Yeah, it is really interesting, especially when that makes it so much easier. When the access is that much easier, everything speeds up and more efficient, better returns. So it would seem like it would limit confusion and reduce the amount of time.
Yep. You would be amazed how much progress can be made on a particular digital initiative just by kind of going back to the core systems and saying, what exactly drives this and how can we tweak it? Because there's a tendency to over-engineer. Sometimes we already have the core tools we need. We're just not using them properly.
Definitely. So last on the list, and this is really fun, I'd love to go visit, but One Times Square skyscraper has just gone next gen with, they converted the entire building, which didn't actually have anything in it before, and now it's a big augmented reality experience, and you get a virtual tour. And we're seeing this a lot across in many different buildings around the world, and it's really changing the travel and tourism industry.
I'm not sure where I feel about all this. So part of my soul is kind of like, well, part of the experience of going to something like, I don't know, the Grand Canyon was to see the natural thing as it was. And now if I'm going to go see the augmented reality version of the thing, well, do I really need to go there to do that, or can I do that at home? So I'm just kind of like, what exactly am I going to go experience here that's different? And I get that it's a work in progress, but part of my, and maybe I'm just being a little old school here, I'm just kind of like, wait, wasn't there joy in actually going to experience the thing as it actually is versus augmenting it? Other folks may have a better idea than I do, and I'll be open to be a little more convinced, but my initial reaction is a little skeptical.
So, when I travel places and I see these really fun virtual reality, augmented reality buildings, I tend to jump right in and do them multiple times and enjoy them. But I get what you're saying. I think where it comes in handy is for people who aren't able to travel. Say maybe it's going to be a while before you can travel overseas, or maybe that's not something you plan on ever being able to do. So then, or maybe you have a disability or something that prevents you. So now you can use virtual reality to travel and feel like you're there and learn about and see all these different landmarks and historical, monuments and different things that you want to see that you might not ever be able to see. So I think that's where it's useful.
I'll give you an example where I think it might be pretty awesome. And I know that there's some folks probably working on this already, but so in theory, people visit battlefields all the time. It seems to be, a thing in the Civil War set, and you can go to Gettysburg and all these other places, but, you can't actually see the battle play out. You can kind of imagine it because you can, and the more you know about what happened there, the more you can do that. But imagine you had some augmented reality capability and you could actually have that battle play out while you're on the battlefield itself, so you could actually see where the land is and the various hills. That could be interesting, but I don't know if I need to go to Gettysburg to do that if I have this thing, or if this is just something on top of that. So it's going to be interesting times, but who knows? Maybe, we'll all wind up going to Waterloo sometime and the whole thing will just play out in these goggles that we're wearing around.
I like that idea. That's really neat. I could see that being used in like field trips. And I could also see the virtual reality aspect being used in classrooms for learning about geography and things like that.
Are they teaching geography still?
I hope so. I certainly hope so. Well, that brings us to the end of our list today. Did you have any final thoughts, Mike?
I think we're on the cusp of some really exciting stuff. If you kind of look at the things we've talked about in the last few episodes, we have AI and humanoid robots and AR and all kinds of advancements coming down the pike, and the pace of which is faster than ever. So, I think there's a tendency to, when you get into digital transformation and you get into the weeds, you get lost, but remember the joy. And the joy of this thing is to, transform businesses and solve problems and do things in ways that were never imagined. So I feel like right now, maybe the biggest, scarcest commodity that we have is a lack of imagination.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't wait to see what's next with all this amazing technology that's out there. So with that being said, thank y'all, the audience, for tuning in, and stay tuned next week. We'll have more for you.
See y'all later.